And most people just love to use it.
Oh, really? Okay, I'm gonna use the gavel.
I hated using that.
Oh,
Are we
sorry.
ready?
Yes, I got it.
Almost. Okay, it looks like we're live.
Okay, I'm gonna use the gavel.
Friday morning live.
I am calling to order the Friday, July 1st meeting of the Thurston Regional Planning Council. And we're gonna start with introductions. So I'm gonna go through the roster of voting members. And if you are here representing a voting member, please introduce yourself. And after that, I will hand off to Mark, who will introduce TRPC staff and other staff, or
Yes, do you want me to do the non-voting members as well?
oh,
Because you,
Oh, yeah.
you usually go
I'm sorry.
through both.
Yes, I will go
Okay.
through the whole list. I
Okay.
forgot we had non-voting
Yep.
members. That is something I should remember. I will introduce all members. Ask all members to introduce themselves, and then Mark will introduce
Stop, sounds
Okay.
good.
So first, City of Olympia.
Clark Gilman, Vice Chair and Olympia Rep.
Morning, Clark. City of Lacey.
Malcolm Miller, standing in for Councilmember Vasquez.
Hi, Malcolm. City of Tumwater.
Eileen Swarthout, thank you, Tumwater City Council.
Hi, Eileen. And Thurston County. Okay, we'll check back in and see about Thurston
Hey.
County.
This is Matt Unsman. I'll step in for Commissioner Edwards this morning.
Okay. And how about City of Rainier?
Dennis McVeigh, Rainier City Council.
Hi, Dennis.
Hello.
City of Tenino.
John O'Callahan representing the great city of Tenino.
Hi, John. And City of Yelm. I can see Yelm. Okay, we'll come back to Yelm. How about City of Dakota? How about the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation? And Nisqually Indian Tribe?
Joe Cushman here. I don't know if Heidi or David Aiel is on the call.
Okay,
They're our
hi,
rep.
Joe.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Yep.
How about North?
Mike Mason from the Nisqually Tribe.
Oh, okay, we have two folks from Nisqually. Great. Two is better than one. How about North Thurston Public Schools?
Gretchen Molesca.
Hi, Gretchen.
Good morning.
And Tumwater School District.
Mel Murray, Facilities.
Hi, Mel. And I'm Hillary. I'm here representing the Olympia School District. How about Intercity Transit?
Debbie Sullivan, representing Intercity Transit.
Hi, Debbie. And Lot Clean Water Alliance.
Carolyn Cox, representing City of Lacey on Lot.
Hi, Carolyn. Nice to see you.
You
How
too.
about Port of Olympia?
Bob Aiel here from Port of Olympia.
Hi, Bob. Bob's here with the small but mighty group of us here in person. And the PUD of Thurston County. You see Chris? Oh, okay. How about Thurston Conservation District?
Hi, good morning. It's Helen Wheatley, Board of Supervisors from the Conservation District.
Hi, Helen. And what about Lacey Fire District? I see Rick.
Red, he's down the bottom.
Hello, Rick Kelling from Lacey Fire District. Thank you.
Oh, hi, Rick. My screen looks different than the screen on the wall. I should pay attention to that. How about Puget Sound Regional Council? And the Evergreen State College?
Scott Morgan with Evergreen.
Hi, Scott. Thurston EDC.
Good morning, Michael Cade.
Hi, Michael. And Timberland Regional Library. Cheryl here? Okay, so let's go back and see. Do we have Thurston County other than Matt? Matt, are you here for the whole meeting? Yes, okay.
Yes, I will be here.
Okay, so I will check off Thurston County. How about Yelm? Did I
See
see
him?
Joe?
He's in,
Okay.
he's in silhouette.
Yep, I'm here. My lighting's odd, so you see the.
So mysterious, Joe. How about Dakota? Did Dakota arrive? Okay, and who else? Confederated Tribes of Chehalis Reservation. and PUD. Okay, I think that's everybody. Mark, you want to introduce staff?
I will. So from Intercity Transit, we have Ann Freeman Manzanares and Jessica Gould. From Thurston County, we already heard from Matt Unzelman. From Lacey, Martin Hoppy. From Olympia, Joyce Phillips. From TRPC, we have myself, Mark Daly, Vina Tabbitt, Karen Parkhurst, Dave Reed, Paul Brewster, Amy Hatch-Winica, and Berlina Lucas. And I believe that is, and I'd also like to, Mike Mason introduced himself from the Nisqually tribe. Joe Cushman, staff for the tribe, is here, as is Paul Walk with Redline Communications. They are going to be our presenters on the work that Nisqually's been doing on broadband.
Ooh,
So thank you very much for coming.
welcome, welcome. Excited for that one. Okay. Thank you, Mark. That takes us to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move, John Callahan.
Second, Gretchen Maliska.
Right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signal by saying aye or raising hand or both.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. That takes us to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So move, John Callahan.
I'll second. This is Eileen Swarthout.
Great, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent calendar, please signal by raising your hand or saying aye or both.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, seeing none, the consent calendar is approved. That takes us to public comment, and there is no one registered for public comment. Is that still the case for Lena? Nobody jumped on?
You're correct.
Okay, great. And that then brings us to other business. So our first item, number 6, is a position classification presentation for action from Mark Daly.
Thank you very much. All right, let me just get situated with my 3 screens here. So this is something that I started talking about with council in April. We've got a couple of key transitions coming up this year with Deputy Director Vina Tabbitt leaving TRPC in September, and Karen Parkhurst, Policy and Planning Director, leaving in early 2023. And so talked with council in April about the plan for going forward for these. Now I got to figure out which is the right mouse, sorry. And this is the succession plan that we've put into place. And it includes, in April, the council approved creating and filling a finance and HR manager position, which was filled internally by Tyson Justice in May. Right now, we have the recruitment open for the transportation manager, looking to make decisions on that soon and bring that person on. We're hoping for some overlap with that position before Vina Tabbitt leaves. And today, what I'm asking, and I talked about this back during the discussion about succession, that I'd be bringing back for council the planning manager position, because by our policies, the creation of a new position class requires council approval. And so there was one correction from the staff report. In the staff report, I had this position at our range 29. It actually should have been range 31. That's a difference of 5%. So this one is range 31. It's going to be our planning manager. This is the person, to remind you, that'll be managing our planning staff with a real heavy emphasis on project management, personnel development, mentorship. So really looking for a manager of our planning group. And so the position description is attached to your packet, and we are looking for council action to approve the creation of this planning manager position that we'll be looking to fill nearer the end of this year. With that, I'm going to stop sharing and take any questions.
Great. So just one second, John. I forgot to go over the process for our questioning. Apologies for that. So what we'll do, unless the presenter is asking for a different approach, is we will wait for the presentation to end. At that time, I will open the queue for questions from members of council. And if you would like to ask a question, please signal. If you're in person, you can give me a look or a wave. If you're online, you can raise your hand using the raise hand feature in Zoom, and I will run a queue. I will try to run an equitable queue, which means that I will try and prioritize folks who have not had the chance to ask a question or state a position during the meeting. So if you've already spoken, I might jump over you to let someone else speak first, but I will try and get to everyone who has something important to say or a question to ask about an item. So sorry for not explaining that protocol at the beginning of the meeting, which I usually do. So I'll make like a couple of mistakes every meeting, and it'll be a slot machine, which one I'm doing this meeting. Okay, so with that, it sounds like John has a question, and I will go ahead and start the queue. So John, go ahead.
Is it possible that you can give a little back history on why this is here again because of TPB?
This is, I'm not sure, this is not, ask that again. I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay. Did this come before TPB as well?
No, I mean, we've told TPB about this, but this is a council action where the personnel, the personnel action of creating a new position class, that is clearly council. So we briefed TPB on the succession plan, so they knew how we were planning to address these key departures, but it's up to council to create the position.
It sounded like there was some questions from TPB. That's why it came back.
I think you're referring to the discussion about whether or not we should have staff support for federal funding applications.
Oh, yeah.
Completely different.
Okay.
Completely different.
Okay, thank you.
Not at all related. And so if there aren't more questions, be looking for a motion to approve the creation of a planning manager position.
Yeah, are there any other questions on Zoom? I'm looking for indication.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, it sounds like John is moving that the board take action. Okay, Berlina, can you tell me what the language is here? Move to approve.
The creation of a planning manager position at compensation range 31.
Okay, so John is making a motion to approve the creation of a planning manager at range 31. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Eileen.
Great, thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the creation of the planning manager position at range 31. Is there any further discussion? All right. Oh,
yeah. We talked about this when we brought this up before, and again, I just want to emphasize that I hope we can find somebody that's actually local. It'll make the job a whole lot easier, and bring the learning curve way down. It's almost at that point they can almost jump right in.
Appreciate that.
We have lots of good talent in Thurston County. Woo! All right. Any other further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signal by saying aye or raising your hand or both.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, the motion passes.
Thank you, council.
Onward. Okay, so the next item is very exciting presentation from the Nisqually Indian Tribe on the broadband access efforts. And we have Paul, Joe, and somebody else.
And
here?
Mike Mason
And Mike
as well.
Welcome, Paul, Joe, and Mike. Would you like us to hold questions until the end of your presentation?
That would be
Yes.
appreciated.
Yeah.
That works for you? Great,
Yeah.
that is what we will do.
And I'll give a quick intro. Really excited to have this presentation. We've been talking quite a bit about broadband access in council and in transportation policy board. And you see it in the federal law and the bipartisan infrastructure law in terms of broadband is so very closely related to transportation, land use, and what is possible in a given area. And the Nisqually tribe has been doing some pretty inspiring work to help bring broadband, bring fiber to our South County communities. And so I know a number of folks have heard about this, but wanted to bring this in front of council because of the discussions we've had and because there's just a lot of momentum on this work, which is incredibly exciting to see. So thank you, Paul, Joe, and Mike for joining us.
Sure. I was going to start, Joe Cushman here, Tribal Planning Director. And good morning, TRPC. I was going to start out with a couple of minutes of overview, and then I will turn it over to Paul, assisted by Mike, to kind of walk through the PowerPoint. It's really exciting. The tribe became aware of the importance of broadband back a couple of years ago when COVID-19 hit, and we were at the same time putting a fiber to the home project on the reservation. And it really made a difference as to how we were able to, students, families, employees, programs, it really helped us communicate and kind of weather the storm. And after that, we became aware that this was not just a problem on the reservation, it was a bigger issue. And so we started to look out into Thurston and Pierce counties and say, what is the situation out there? And can we take this show on the road, so to speak? And that's kind of what we've done. At the same time that we were doing this, we developed a Nisqually Communications fiber optic company. Bob Ayel and his team at MCEC put that together, and it is out there doing work every day, installing fiber optic line all over Western Washington. Very successful. And we, as part of our effort, we started to reach out to both Thurston and Pierce and say, tell us about your needs, tell us who's underserved, tell us who is unserved, and let's talk about what we can do. And so we actually ended up right now, we've met with both Thurston and Pierce, we've had discussions, we've negotiated contracts, and we're doing some what's called survey, assessment, and pre-engineering work in both counties, identifying areas that need service that don't have it or are underserved. And it's very exciting. And in the meantime, we've also been doing a number of broadband grants. A lot of this is grant funded. And we received some funding through State CURB and funding through the Washington State Broadband Office. And we have a couple of big federal grants that are pending. So we're trying to use grant funds to get this thing off the ground. And I think we're going to be successful. We do have a large multi-jurisdictional proposal going into the state broadband this fall, a combination of Nisqually, Thurston, Pierce project that will probably serve, I think, at least a couple of thousand more underserved homes. And Mike and Paul can give you more detail on that. Long-term, the tribe will end up, we hope, owning and operating a large, what's called an OAN that is on the reservation and extends out into both Thurston and Pierce. It's very exciting. We developed this thing kind of from the ground up. It's kind of homegrown, and we're learning as we're going, but we're just thrilled to be able to talk about it today, and we want to continue to working with the counties and with TRPC on this thing. So Paul and Mike, you want to take it from there?
Mike, you want to go first? I believe you're on mute, Mike.
No, I'm gonna let you go ahead and take off. I'll just, whatever you need added on, I can do that at the tail end.
Okay, great. Well, first off, I'm Paul Walk, President of Redline Communications, consultant for the Nisqually tribe. I've been working with the tribe for several years, and the projects just keep getting more and more exciting. Joe gave a really good overview, so this PowerPoint will kind of touch on the points to help educate everybody on where we're at so far. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So this is where we stand to date. Joe had mentioned that we have several grant applications that we've submitted and several that we are pending approval on. So with the NTIA, they have a tribal broadband set aside of $1 billion from 2021. So the tribe took advantage of that opportunity and applied for a few different projects. One was a technology center on the reservation that would serve as kind of home base to harness all of this fiber optics planned throughout the county, and also have a community computer center in there and a kind of a community awareness center and technology development center inside that technology building. There's also another run that leaves the tribe, and I'll show you a slide after this that kind of overviews this, but leaves the tribe and goes down to the Rochester area to provide services in that area. And another run that leaves the tribe and goes to the tribe's Marvin Road property, which is quite a large future development opportunity for the tribe. So currently we applied for round 1 of the Washington State Department of Commerce broadband office grant opportunity. And we scored number 3 in the state on our application, and were awarded $6,775,000 to provide services to the Northern Rochester and Little Rock area. So that supplies services to 861 underserved and non-served homes in that community. So we're very excited to receive that award. We also applied to CURB, and as you see on the slide, we have multiple awards that have been given us to CURB. Joe had mentioned that we kind of started this thing off with a Nisqually fiber to the home build. So that was a GPON build, and for those of you who don't know what that is, it's gigabit passive optical network, which is about as good as it gets network-wise out there. Currently there's a capacity of 1 gig to every home for every tribal member on the Nisqually reservation through fiber directly to the home. So we built that with a grant loan combination from a CURB award back in 2020. And we moved on and did an assessment, the OAN feasibility assessment that led to this project, and we assessed Thurston County. And then we also assessed the technology center and the feasibility of putting that in on the reservation. And then we applied for a section from Nisqually to that Little Rock build that we were awarded from WSBO, and we were awarded that one as well. So we now have funding to leave the Nisqually reservation, go to the Little Rock community, and then all the way down to Rochester. So pretty excited about where this is all heading. As Joe mentioned, we have an interlocal agreement the tribe does with Thurston County now, and they received funding to go out and do a county-wide survey. There's been survey efforts in the past, but one of the things that we're really trying to isolate is people that don't have service. It's hard for somebody to take an internet speed test if they just don't have internet. And we've ran into that already. So we have 5 people out going door to door, doing in-person surveys, having people take speed tests and documenting the information. We've also established a website where the Thurston County constituency can take a speed test, and we also have a Facebook page where they can take the speed test, and I'll be sharing that with you later throughout the slide in hopes that you can help us spread awareness. We also received a notification from Pierce County after applying for a grant in Pierce County. And that notification was a request to partner with the Nisqually tribe going forward to provide services to the underserved areas of Pierce County. So that was received very well. And we assessed an area with some funding from Pierce County that's helping us apply for this, the second round of the Department of Commerce broadband funding. So we're preparing for that application right now, and that is a $25 million application that will provide services to 5,000 under and unserved residences between Thurston and Pierce County. So to date, we haven't awarded $11.5 million, and we have $51 million pending. So if you could turn the next slide, please. So here is an overview. It's easy to talk about it, but I think this really sends the message home of where we're at in this effort. If you look from Tenino to the right, everything that you see from Tenino to the right is this round 2 WSBO application. And to explain that in a little further detail, we have a committed service provider letter from Astound Broadband, formerly Wave Broadband. So the tribe is in the business of building an open access network, which means the tribe is not going to be a service provider. In fact, studies have shown that open access networks promote lower costs and competition throughout anywhere they're implemented. So the tribe would own the fiber optic infrastructure and lease that to any provider that wants access. 90% of your cost in providing broadband is the infrastructure implementation. And so if the tribe can receive grant funding to support the majority of this build, it's going to make broadband access easier for everybody and less expensive for everybody throughout our region. So this project, leaving Tenino and heading east, comes over, and the first section that you see in the red and blue is like the Lower Rainier Yelm area. And we've done in-person speed tests of that area to establish that this is truly under and unserved. And that's how we came to developing the route design after that point. As you head to Yelm, you'll see a green line there that connects to the next portion, which is in Pierce County. That green line is existing fiber from Astound Broadband that they've agreed to allow the tribe to use. And this section over here on the right in Pierce County, all the way over until you see that, that 702 highway symbol, is the last part of that grant. Now, this is an important factor here. When you look to the right of that 702, Highway 702 marker, you'll see the Eatonville, Clear Lake area. Now, Astound Broadband has committed that if we are awarded this section prior to that I just explained to you, that they will build this Clear Lake Eatonville section as a caveat, and they're putting that into our application to the state. And this is an additional 2,000 people that they will self-fund as part of our project. So altogether, we will fund a total of 5,000 under and unserved people with this $25 million application. We've had a chance to review this with the director of WSBO, and it looks like it's something that everybody is excited to see coming. It's a partnership between two counties and a tribe, and to provide 5,000 subscribers with services is an excitement to everybody. Just to give you a little understanding of what you're seeing here, the slide on the bottom kind of gives you some indications that blue represents what we have already done pre-engineering assessments to detail as aerial. So those are existing joint utility poles that we'll be attaching to. And then everything in red, there are no joint utility poles to access. So this is all new underground builds. And what you see in green is this section, the section of green by Yelm was the existing fiber from Astound, and the section up by the Nisqually tribe is the existing fiber to the home build that is already in place. So everything else you see on here is part of our effort to date. And we have additional areas that are not on here that we are in development of for additional grant purposes. And as we do these surveys throughout Thurston County, the point is for us to have a true definition of all areas that are under and unserved so that we can develop grants to fill those areas with the open access network. Next slide, please. So to help us with the surveys that are being conducted, the tribe has established a website, and it's pretty simple, nisquallyspeedtest.com. And so we really are asking for the community's help to spread awareness of this website that people can go to and simply press the start button, and it will bring them to a survey page, and they'll be instructed to take a speed test survey. Why a speed test survey is so important is that when we apply for the grants, we need to make sure that every person that we're attempting to connect is truly under and unserved. And the only way that we know that is if they take a speed test and we can see what those results are. Next page, please. The tribe has also established a Facebook page, and that link is on here. It's the broadband access team. And our hope is to spread awareness of this as well so that community members can access this and take the survey on that as part of a link here as well. We also have a telephone number that's going in today that people can text because we've already received notices from individuals within the county that do not have enough internet speed to take the test. They get an error. And so we want them to be able to provide their address and that information to us. So a phone number will be up and live today as well, and it'll go on both of these sites that people can access, and we'll also be trying to spread awareness of that to those who do not have internet. Next slide, please. This is just giving you an idea of our door-to-door surveys. We have multiple teams out conducting these surveys. We've had some pretty good responses already. Each survey person is completing about 10 surveys a day. And so at that rate, we're completing about 50 surveys a day. And the way that we have scheduled these is we've used the existing state broadband speed test information to help define areas that they show as under and unserved. And we're targeting those areas first and collecting information that way. And we plan on these door-to-door surveys going for about 3 months. We think that'll be enough time for us to collect about 5,000 individual home speed test information. Next slide, please. As Joe mentioned, part of the Nisqually tribe's effort into broadband is they created Nisqually Communications, which is a fiber optic aerial and underground communications construction company. They do a lot of work in our region. I've mentioned that Astound Broadband is partnered with the tribe as being a service provider, one committed service provider on this network. And they do the majority of their work within our region. And they've also worked for ports, PUDs, Verizon's 5G project, done quite a bit of work and continue to grow within our region. Next slide, please. And the next slides, if you all want to take the time, it's to introduce the team. It's some background information on myself, Mike, Joe, Cynthia Aiel, and Chris Olin, the IT director at the Nisqually tribe. So with that, Mike, do you want to finish off with any additional information, or Joe?
Yeah, I would. I'll follow up on a couple of things. One thing I want to emphasize to everybody here, out of all the programs in Washington State, you know, the broadband monies came out over a year ago, federal monies, and everybody's jumped on it. Everything was set up with open access. And out of all the programs out there, there's only one program that is truly open access. That's ours here in Thurston County. We have an open access. We have a contract that we're working out with Astound. Now they'll be a service provider, but we've also contacted and worked with Comcast. They may be interested. It's for the same price that would be for Astound or anybody else. So there is no blockage. On a lot of the other entities, between how they sign up their first contract, who becomes their service provider, within those contracts, there's verbiage in there that with maintenance and so forth, and the cost that they put on there, it makes it too costly for other providers to get on there. So when you really rate it out there, Thurston, what we're putting here in Thurston County is truly open access. So I just want to make sure everybody knew that. The NTI funds that we're trying to get to the feds, if you're not aware, it's a cluster. The feds have promised all these monies that are supposed to come out last year and this year. It's just trickling out. I'm on the Department of Commerce State CURB board, and the funds that come from the feds to the state so we can distribute through broadband, we haven't seen a penny. So even with CURB, they had $50 million set aside for broadband. They've stopped. They put a halt on that. They're not even taking applications. So if anything down the road, we may need support from all the entities probably signing a letter to help push NTIA for funding. But other than that, like Paul described, we are working diligently on the grants that are out there. We're applying for everything that's coming down the pike. We have meetings on a regular basis with the state broadband. They know the project. We're working here in Thurston County. They're excited. This is a project that's really kind of a big star for them because we're truly integrated with the community, and meaning the municipalities and so forth, that we really interact and work with you folks. So we're excited. We're proceeding with this. We're there to help the community to bring broadband to the affordability for everyone. Joe, do you have anything?
I think we covered it.
All right. Got it.
Somebody's got their audio on.
I don't have mine on.
Try it now.
Okay.
Notice I've been muted.
Yeah, I think it was yours.
Not me.
No, but it's gone now.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for the presentation. That was really, really exciting. I will go ahead and open the queue for anyone who wants to ask questions. And I see Joe in the queue. So Joe, you're the first one. Go ahead.
Joe, you may be muted if you're speaking.
Oh, thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
So first of all, I think it's a great endeavor that the Nisqually Indian tribe is doing. Y'all are filling a great need for the Yelm area and a portion of South County too, a large portion of South County. It's amazing work and thank you. Yelm's happy to sign on any letter or help. And for me, I'm willing to help any capacity I can. And I also need to chat with Chair Frank on a few things. So I'll add my support to the conversation. But you mentioned driving people to your site and Facebook page for a speed test to find those low connection speeds. What about those people with no current internet access where they live or choose not to get internet due to the low connection speed? How do you determine those numbers?
So I'll go ahead and field this one. We touched on it briefly that, we are aware that there are people who do not have access to internet with quality enough to take any kind of a speed test. So we do have door-to-door surveys taking place for that purpose, primarily for that purpose, is to find those gaps. And I can tell you that the areas that we're sending people are very remote. Some very long driveways and some explaining that has to be done in certain circumstances of why they're there. But we are making the effort for that reason. The other thing that we've done, as I mentioned, was that we'll have a phone number that will be live today that we can share that people can text their information. And if they do not have internet, they can text their name, their address, and the fact that they do not have access to internet. But that is our primary concern, is those that do not have internet. And then our second tier is those that have poor quality internet.
Oh, great. Thank you, Paul. And happy to push this out on, the city's webpage and our social media as well. So just, I'll look for that link.
So if anybody on here, I don't know if everybody has access to that slide, maybe we can get that to everybody, but I have both the link to the Nisqually website and the Facebook page, which both have the survey on them. And real quickly, again, the easiest one is nisquallyspeedtest.com.
And Paul, this is Mark Daly. We will make sure that both of those links, council members know that we send out an after meeting summary after each meeting. We'll make sure that those links are in that after meeting summary under this agenda item.
Greatly appreciated. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Joe. It looks like Eileen is up next.
Oh, thank you. This is very exciting. What a great presentation and what's going to be happening in that area. So I was going to ask about timeline, but it sounds like since the money hasn't been pushed out yet, you really don't have a timeline when this will be in place.
So it's definitely a multifaceted approach. We have a call into WSBO based on our round one application that was approved back in, I believe it was November. We received the award. We did receive an email from the Department of Commerce last month saying that by month's end, they expected contracts to be issued. Once the contracts are issued, then we can start the work progress. And that's going to be engineering, permitting, and then construction. So, engineering and permitting can take 6 to 8 months for that portion, and then the construction begins after that. We also have a call into curb on that award, and we're basically, it's a mirror image of what we're doing with the Department of Commerce. So we're hopeful that by next week we will have a go-ahead on both projects so that we can start the engineering portion. And then with the remaining grants that we're applying for, I wouldn't anticipate us starting anything for about a year from now on future grants.
Okay, oh, thank you. And I did want to follow up. So when this is in place, then it'll be, broadband will be available for any of the residents living in those areas, not just tribal members, it'll be for everyone in that area?
Right, yes.
Oh, that's amazing. Good for you guys.
Paul, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I was telling Joe to go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
He did.
what we found out was the impact of broadband on the reservation. It's a countywide issue, and the difference it made out here, we know can make out, especially in these more remote rural areas. So it just makes overwhelming sense to get this thing in place. Because we're all in this together, so to speak. So
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. When we started this project 3 years ago, when we found out after we did the reservation, I'm not going to say it was relatively easy. We had some tasks to get through, but from the start of the application till burying the fiber in the ground, I think it was 13 months, Paul. And so once we saw that, and then we realized what it did for the community, and we saw that the issues there were in the surrounding communities, and when we started reaching out, it just exploded. So with the direction of our council, that's why we started moving out in the community. So that's the tribe's philosophy. It's not just to help just the Nisqually community, it's the entire community surrounding.
Great. Are there any additional questions from members? Okay, and I don't see any in the room. Well, I just want to, again, thank you so much for the presentation. It's just such a beautiful example of our interconnectedness, and thank you for your leadership on this issue that we've all been talking about so much in the past 2.5 to 3 years. And I think I can speak for all of us, and we're excited to see where it's going. And it sounds like you have robust support from the bulk of members for your work. So thank you again.
All right. So stay tuned. We'll come back for an update.
I love it.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so that brings us to the Human Services Transportation Plan update with Karen.
So this morning, we're moving right into another kind of access. And I have a slide presentation that I'm sure is in the process of getting up. Yes, thank you very much. So we talked about access to the internet. Now we're talking about access to transportation. And I think the same kinds of arguments about what happens when you don't have access apply to transportation like they do to broadband. It cuts people off from what they need in the community. So I have come to you before. I'm coming back to give you a little bit of an update and to continue to ask for your help. So once again, the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan is one that we update every 4 years, which is a federal and state requirement. And it is really an important look at how transportation is available to the broad community. Next slide. So first off, I'm going to do a little advertising. We have the opportunity to participate this fall in something that the nonprofit Disability Rights Washington is putting on. We cannot we can tell you about this. We cannot necessarily promote it, but we can tell you about it. And basically the idea is for folks to take a commitment to not driving for a week. And next slide. And it's really to think about that piece of, we assume that driving is the norm. In this part of the country in particular, in parts of the East Coast, if you live in New York, and you may not assume that driving is the norm. In fact, if I lived there, I would be a crazy person to be driving in downtown New York City. I'd take some other means. But here, where we're riding our ponies out into the sunset all by ourselves, we have a little bit of bias towards traveling by car. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with traveling by car. But this week that we're talking about basically asks you to think, what if you couldn't drive? What if you needed to ride the bus, needed to ride your bike, needed to walk to get someplace? What would you do if you couldn't get around in your vehicle? So we don't think about this a lot. If you can drive, if you can afford your car, if you could afford to pay for gas. So what we're really doing is looking at least the 25%, and that's typically underreported, of the people in our state who do not own a vehicle, cannot drive for whatever reason. And we're really looking at giving yourself a chance to experience that. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a link to that so that you can commit to it. There's a lot of interest in having elected officials particularly look at, well, what would this feel like? What kind of choices would I make? Okay, I'm gonna get off the ad and go on to the next slide. We'll send more information about this out as it moves forward. So now I'm gonna ask you to imagine, and I think it was just an excuse to use John Lennon in a slide, and I probably will get in trouble for using his picture. But anyway, I really want us to imagine that you're the kid who lives in town and your mom can't drive anymore safely. You know that isolation is really bad. How do you help her get around, and where would you find the information you need for that to happen? Or perhaps you have a day job where you are helping people and you see folks that come in and you made an appointment with that client and they said, how do I get there? What transportation options are available? Would we have the information we need to provide to this person? Now let's imagine that in that scenario, it's a required appointment. So this is, you work for the court system. You work for some part of government that provides services to people who are low income or the like, or need help. How do you do that? Your schedule is jammed. They must meet in person. How do you figure out a way for them to make that required appointment? How do they get there if they don't have a car and they don't drive? One of the things we'll find, especially with people who have low incomes, that in many instances, they have lost their driver's license, and it's most often for non-moving issues. It's about parking tickets. And so that might be a barrier. Okay, and Sam, I have your whole family coming to you for help because I assume you're decision makers in your families, just like you are out in the world. And let's say your nephew can no longer afford to drive to his higher education classes and he asks for your help. What options are available? Or your neighbor has 3 part-time jobs and says, you're in government, can you help me? And none of those jobs are in the commute time. So even though you might be on a bus route, perhaps intercity transit doesn't operate to a job that starts at 3 o'clock in the morning, at the hospital. And so the last one is about, you've made a pledge to reduce greenhouse gases in your household. Buildings and transportation are the top contributors in our community, and you, your partner, 2 kids and 2 dogs need to get around. So how well does our community work without a car? And I'd really like, this is one of the interactive parts. I really want you to think about this of, one, is there service available? Do you know how to direct people to it? Do we make this assumption all the time that everyone can get here? I remember when South Puget Sound Community College was doing some of the work they're doing with students when Parfait Basile was there working on that program. And he said that the first few times that they did the workshops, they didn't have good attendance. And people said, well, you're having them at this time when there's no transit service. You're having them first thing in the morning and I have to get to work, or I have to get my kids to daycare before I can be part of this. So how do we really put into our day-to-day minds the idea that everyone will not be using the same way to get there? And I want to say over and over again, this isn't about cars are bad, driving is bad. This is about broadening our thinking. When we look at the percentage of people over 85 in our communities, I know all of us think, I will drive forever. I imagine some of us have had the experience of sitting our father down and saying, you know, it's not safe for you to drive anymore. Let's have a talk with your doctor about that. So there's just, we cannot continue to have the assumption that we will drive forever. Next slide. So one of the things we know about in our community, and if you don't know about this, I'll be sending you a link to it, is Thurston Here to There. This is a website that we put together, TRPC, and that we are updating that says, here's some ideas about how to get around. Here's some safe routes to school maps. Here's some contacts in the transit community, not just in Thurston County, but across county lines. And so part of this is let's figure out how to get people to accesses. We make an assumption that everyone can just look at Google Maps and they will make sense and they will be accurate, and that everybody has access to them and they will have a signal when they need it. And that's not necessarily true either. And so I really will be sending you links to say, go out here and see if this provides some help for you. And might provide some help for all those people in your lives that say, how do I do this? Next slide. So what we know about transportation services, it is not necessarily about there's one answer and it'll solve everyone's problems. It is one trip at a time, one person at a time. One hopes that we're able to group some of those trips together. And so we have ride sharing kinds of capabilities, but mostly it's really, what do I need to do to get from here to there? And how can someone help me? So this plan update really asks us to document what services are available and what are the current providers, to document what the needs are. So maybe intercity transit works great, again, but except for that 3 o'clock in the morning person that needs to get to work. Maybe the rural transit service works really great, but it doesn't go on Saturdays. Maybe you haven't been able to find a rideshare partner in Rideshare Online. So it really is, what are those needs? And typically those are evening hours, those are weekend hours, there's a more frequent service. And so we'll be documenting those. And then how do we fix it? What are those strategies? How do we become the Nisqually Indian tribe and find solutions to this? Their elegant presentation about how they've gone about this is so impressive. And how do we become those people that enable people to have access? And then we have to talk about priorities, resources, time, feasibility, money. And then part of this plan includes the regional priorities list. And we've talked about this before. In order to receive funding through DOT grant programs, you have to be on this regional priorities list. You need to be part of this plan. Next slide. And So this is the Nothing About Us Without Us. Of course, many are familiar with this from the ADA and other services where we don't go out and make guesses about what people need. We try and talk to the people, and we recognize that people who have issues that they're bringing to the table may also have possible solutions. And so it's really important that we're asking people not only what do you need that you're not able to get from our transportation system, but what do you think could fix that? Next slide. So our general outreach, and we have started this, and I have reached out to many of you, and you're going to hear from me again on what our general categories of outreach are. So we want to talk to people with disabilities, seniors, people with low incomes, other people with special transportation needs, public, private, nonprofit, human services, transportation providers. And there are many in our community. You may have a faith-based organization in your community that helps people get to church services, but they might also have some availability to take people shopping. It might be, a veterans service that has transportation available, and the Veterans Hub in Lacey provides some of that service. It may be removing a barrier for veterans. So for rural transit, RT, we heard from the veterans that for some people, it was difficult to transfer from one bus to another. So for those who are accessing veteran services in Lewis County in the Centralia area, you can call and make arrangements and have a direct connection to those rather than having to make a transfer to Twin Transit to get you to the final destination. Sometimes it's a very small help that helps a lot. We're also looking to other members of the public, and then we're of course looking across county to look at those folks. When we started RT, we were told many times, you guys up north think you're the center of the universe, but we need to get to Centralia. That's where we're going to school. That's where we're going shopping. And so make sure that we have connections there. Next slide. So the specifics, we're reaching out to employers, WorkFirst, chambers of commerce, education. Schools have a lot of information on folks that can't get there. You encourage parents to come and talk about their kids and provide opportunities for that. And that's not always possible for people. And we don't always consider transportation. The health department, emergency management personnel, organizations for people with disabilities, veterans. So we're reaching out to all those folks. And basically the requirements for the plan are, we need to check a box that said that we reached out to these communities. And we have Michael Cade on the phone today. Many employers and WorkFirst folks and chambers of commerce are hearing this from employees or potential employees. How do I get there? Yes, I would love to take this wonderful job, but how will I get there? So it really is looking at kind of a 360-degree look at what do people need to get to where they need to go. Next slide. So I want to get back to the prioritized project list for a minute. And I've mentioned RT, the rural transit system, because it's near and dear to my heart, as you all know. But the prioritized projects that have been funded is the Here to There mobility management website that I talked about. This grant program has provided replacement dial lift vehicles, Village Vans, which is a great program that Intercity Transit runs that looks at people who are part of WorkFirst and trains them to be drivers of these vehicles and with some other work-based skills, and then they're able to move on to other jobs. Thurston County Bus Buddies for so many people. We haven't ridden the bus since we were in 4th grade, and we're really worried that we're going to get stranded someplace. And the Bus Buddy program really helps people. They accompany people while they take bus trips until they feel comfortable. And that's always great to have a friend around when you're going to a new place. And then partners, Catholic Community Services, Intercity Transit, and TRPC have all been receive funding through this program. So that prioritized project list that you will be putting together later this year is really important. Next slide. So help. In the after meeting summary, and I'll send other email out to you guys. What are you hearing from your constituents and clients? Is somebody coming to City Hall and saying, boy, I could take this job if only I could get there. Can you guys help? We also really need help as we're working with Intercity Transit and other transportation providers on coordinating schedules, connections, and information. If I call Intercity Transit's help desk, customer service, boy, it's a lot easier than reading the bus schedule. And I know how to read bus schedules, but I don't always know the best way to plan my route. And so calling them is really important because they also know about RT. They know about service in Lewis County. They're able to really help people connect in the community. And then who knows the needs? I have mentioned this before. There are often movers and shakers in your community that you don't know, that I don't know about, but that you know that this person in this store knows everybody, and this is the person everybody comes to for information and advice, and help me find that person. We also, in this update to the plan, have to talk about what happened during COVID and what we learned. And we learned a lot about drivers, and unfortunately, we're continuing to learn that every day as we look at who those school bus drivers are and those transit drivers. And I have not talked to anybody in the state who is a transportation provider that hasn't said, how do we find more drivers? How do we have consistency of this? What happens when 20% of my drivers walk in and say, I've been exposed to COVID or I have COVID? How do I keep service? One of the things about transit service is the reliability. Will the bus come when I need it to come? Can I trust that? And before COVID, absolutely yes. Now it's like we may have to cancel service if we don't have a driver, and we may not know that until a few hours before service. So, and then one of the exciting things I think in our community is Intercity Transit and RT have both gone fare free. And so what does that mean? What barriers did we remove by doing that? And how is that helping people get where they need to go? So as I'm telling these stories, I'm going to be reaching out to schools and others saying, hey, what are you hearing? What's happening? I have a question for schools that I'm going to be following up with very soon, and that's McKinney-Vento and getting homeless kids. And what happened to that during the COVID situation? Because that was one of the challenges we reported on in the last update to the plan. Next slide. Slide. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to send me contact information, invite me to come to your meetings, probably virtually since numbers are up, talk on the phone, test here to there, take the week without driving challenge, talk to your family. You probably have smart kids that are about to get out of school or just got out of school, and maybe they'd like a project for a while. Have them say, what could I do in my neighborhood to help people get where they need to go? And then there'll be probably a couple of small surveys. Next slide. So what we know already about the goals of this plan, some of them are from past plans. We want to increase equity in the transportation services, increase mobility options, improve individual service, increase coordination, improve efficiency, find sustainable funding to close gaps, and then broadly distribute information about available transportation options. And then again, back to this access. How are we getting people access to telework, telemedicine, online public services, teleeducation? Broadband is part of transportation. It's another highway, as it were. and then drivers. So obviously, these are issues that we've talked about today and that you've been talking about. Next slide. So we're doing public outreach now, trying to reach as many people as we can. On September 1st, we will submit a draft to the public and to DOT for review. And then during that public review, we're going to continue our outreach. So drive people to the plan, but also recognize that we may make changes to the plan based on what we hear from people during that review. And so that outreach continues. December 1st, we need to submit the final to DOT. And in December, TRPC will adopt this. You guys will adopt this with the prioritized project list. And it's possible that the list won't be due until January. We're having a little bit of confusion on when that is due. But how can you help? What could you do? I'd be happy to take volunteers. I'd be happy to answer any questions. So over to you.
Great, thank you, Karen. I see Rick is in the queue, so Rick, go ahead and I will keep note of, and then Carolyn and Clark. Okay, Rick, go ahead.
Rick, you are muted.
Hey, Rick, we can't hear you. Can you unmute? There you go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, just not a question, but a comment. Just as our emergency first responders are connecting with folks every day throughout the community, we will look for some kind of a handout to give to those who don't have access or aren't as informed on all the transportation options. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks.
That is an awesome idea, Rick. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Yes, Karen, would it be helpful to try to schedule a presentation by you guys during a city council work session? And if so, what time frame are you looking at?
Oh, as soon as possible, of course. So we would be happy to do that. And it could be short. I took some time today because we had time. And as you can see, I have a bit of passion for this topic because I was the kid in town. And so please, we would be happy to do that. And it could be between now and actually when it's out for public comment would be fine. So basically through September, anytime through September would be terrific.
Okay, thanks.
And Clark?
Thank you. First, I wanted to add on, the week without driving is aimed directly at us as policymakers. The idea is that we would have firsthand perspective of some of these policy decisions we're making by trying to live it. So I hope that you'll consider joining me during that time. And then I have, in terms of the what are we hearing, I recently did a mobility audit with Disability Rights Washington around downtown Olympia for a couple of noon hours. And something that I think wasn't in the previous document is kind of the disabled and elderly version of the last mile, which is that while it's true that we need vehicles to move longer distances, you still have to get from the parking stall into the building. You still have to move through the building. And I think that it would be really useful to include access to buildings and that last bit of mobility that likely will be walking or rolling as one of the possible areas to seek projects.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me. Thank you.
Yeah, great insights. Any other comments or questions from members? I'm looking here in the building.
Trying to unmute.
Oh, John is trying to unmute himself. Go ahead, John. Nope, you don't have anything? Okay. He's just messing with me now. Okay. Anything, Carolyn, I'm sorry, is that an old hand or a new hand?
Helen has her hand up.
Sorry.
Oh, Helen, I'm sorry. Thank you. Go ahead, Helen.
Oh,
Oh, you're
Helen,
muted.
you're not,
Helen.
you don't look muted, but we can't hear you.
Send me an email, send me a text, give me a call.
Okay.
I'll follow up with you.
Sorry, Helen.
Oh,
I
wait,
think
we
you
got
are.
you. We got you.
Still defeated by Zoom after all these years. Well, I just wanted to say that the PSRC puts out a nifty opportunity map that's sort of based on census tracts, and one of the elements of that opportunity map is access to transit, which I find, as a sort of a personal thing. I'm helping. I have a family member who has mobility issues and is wanting to move north. And I actually used that opportunity map to help him think about what would be good places for him to live and be able to find a job and be able to get to that job. So it's a very useful tool. And I think it's something that Thurston County could probably put together pretty easily too.
Okay, we'll check that out. And I just want to say one more thing, because again, I love this stuff. This is something that we certainly work on while we're updating the plan, but it's something that we work on year round. So as we're working with intercity transit, with RT, working with social service providers and the like, this is something that is a day-to-day kind of thing. As I said, we're talking about one trip at a time, one person at a time. And so, yes, I would love to come and talk to your councils between now and when the plan is due, but I would love to come talk to you in January or February next year too. And whoever takes over will be happy to come and talk to you after that, after I've retired. And after I've retired, I'll probably be out there pumping, jumping up and down in the streets about this anyway. So, it is a year-round thing. We need transportation all the time. And thank you for all these great ideas.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? I have one thing, but I want to wait to see if anyone else has questions or comments. Okay, well, I mean, Karen, I think you have a fellow sister on this journey of human-centered transportation. This is really exciting work, and summer is a hard time for us to get children and families interested in these kinds of engagements, but I would encourage you to reach out to myself or staff at the school district after September 6th or 7th, and we'll see if we can pull something together. We do have, and I think North Thurston and Tumwater also have school board members who are students. And so using those students as a way to connect with their peers to generate some feedback for you might be a great strategy. One thing I just want to sort of surface is I think it's really important that we also stay focused on understanding what kinds of barriers and sort of intersectional considerations we have to make for individuals based on their language acquisition, based on their presentation or identification personally as a person of color, their identification as someone who is LGBTQIA+. For many of those folks who are students in our system, we hear that safety is a concern. And so, for example, I walked to today's meeting, but I have a sense of safety that is in part due to my racial identity that other individuals might not have access to. And so thinking about that, I think, is really important as well, because that impacts. People have access to a bus, but they don't feel safe on the bus, or they have access to a walking route, but their identity creates a barrier for them, not because of anything they've done, but because of the sentiments of the community that we live in. So anyone else have questions or comments? And if not, we actually are a little ahead of schedule.
Mhm.
So I think we'll go ahead and break until 9:50. Is that okay? And that gives,
Yeah.
yeah?
Yep.
So we're gonna go on break and thank you, Karen, very much. Always appreciated. We'll go on break until 9:50 and we'll return after that.
Old man voices.
Did you
I'll
mute
mute
us in the
us.
room?
Yeah. Now,
Okay, welcome back. Sorry, we were not unmuted. At first we were too unmuted, and now we weren't enough. All right, so we are back for the Thurston Regional Planning Council meeting, and we are moving to item number 10, which is a presentation on the call for projects update. And actually, it sounds like Mark is going to do this presentation.
yes.
So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Mark, and we're going to follow our typical approach, which is we'll wait for Mark to complete the presentation. And then if you have questions, please raise your hand and we will start the queue. Go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. So this is our last presentation for today, and I'll warn you now, this is a pretty meaty one. But what we're trying to do today, we've been talking about the call for projects process for quite some time. And this is the process that we use for the federal funds, the federal transportation funds that we receive through Washington State Department of Transportation. How are we as a council making decisions on where those funds should go? And we've been working on this over the past couple of years. We're getting very close to the end, but there are some remaining questions that we still need to work out. And we're going to be working those out with the Technical Advisory Committee and Transportation Policy Board over the next few weeks. And hopefully we'll be bringing recommendation to council in September. So because remember, we don't meet in August. So in preparation for that, I wanted to take a little bit of a step back and go over the whole process again to make sure that council members have a really strong foundation when we get into discussing this in detail and looking to make a decision on this fall. And so the purpose of this, why are we updating this process at all? And some of the goals behind this are to provide a more direct tie to our performance goals and targets rather than being informed primarily by lane miles, to provide a competitive process with clear and transparent project eligibility and evaluation criteria, and then to continue to position the region to meet obligation targets and be eligible for redistributed funding. I know that last bullet is very wonky, but incredibly important. And the reason it's incredibly important is for a few different reasons. One, it's our job to get those funds and program them timely. But there are benefits to being successful in that job, and there are potential consequences to not being successful in that job of getting the projects obligated, which really means getting them under contract. And so starting in 2020 was the first year that Washington State Department of Transportation really made what they call redistributed funds available to organizations like ours, metropolitan planning organizations. And what redistributed funds are, they're funds from other states that weren't able to meet their obligation target. And as they near the end of the federal fiscal year, which goes from October 1 to September 30th of each year, as they start to reach that end of the year, and they'll look at where states are at. And if there's a state that's really far from hitting their obligation target, they will start to ask other states, can you accept and program more funding? And Washington State has been pretty successful in being one of those states that can capitalize on other states not being able to meet their obligation targets. There's also sanctioned funds. Those are funds that within our state, we have a policy amongst the metropolitan planning organizations, the regional transportation planning organizations, and the state about how we need to get these funds under contract. And if we miss that obligation target 2 years in a row, we actually then will be sanctioned. We will lose funding. And then this year, there was a new piece, which is we've been talking also a lot about the bipartisan infrastructure law, the federal funding. This has upped the funding that the state has had, that the state does have. And so this year in particular, they've been looking for additional projects, and they've been asking metropolitan planning organizations and such, do you have projects that could accept more federal funds? So since 2020 alone, we've received almost $3.7 million of extra money. This is money that was not coming to us to be programmed. This was money that we only received because we consistently hit our obligation targets and because we have looked ahead at what kinds of projects could accept more funding. Our partners in this region do an excellent job of making sure that that when they put in the projects, they know they can get done, and hitting those dates. And that since 2020, and we expect definitely opportunities, at least over the next 5 years, as they continue to program these federal funds, the opportunity for getting some of these redistributed, sanctioned, and additional obligation authority funds is high. And so we want to make sure we absolutely hit the targets that we receive each year, because we receive somewhere between 4 and 5 million to program out each year. So that was almost a full year's worth of funding that we received just on top of that. Really good news. And as you see with those projects, went to a variety of our partners, Intercity Transit, Lacey, Thurston County, Tumwater. Yelm received a project, TRPC. So really, really helpful. Okay, so this applies to, and I need to go through these because you will definitely hear STBG a lot. I will try and always say Surface Transportation Block Grant, but you will hear STBG. This is from Federal Highway Administration. This is the program where we receive the bulk of the funding, the federal funding that comes to us to program. We also receive a smaller amount of Surface Transportation Block Grant set aside, also referred to as transportation alternatives. It's a smaller amount of money that's a little more focused in what it can be used for. It's for smaller scale projects with a heavy multimodal emphasis and active transportation, like trails, bicycle improvements, and pedestrian facilities. And so those are the funds that we're talking about when we talk about this call for projects process primarily. We've also received in CMAQ, congestion mitigation and air quality funds. That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, so what we can't change. There are parts of this process that we receive from the federal government and from the state. And with this most recent law passed by the federal government, there is an increased emphasis on the kind of transportation development like we talk about in Sustainable Thurston. There's an emphasis on infrastructure that helps to promote more urban, active transportation and transit oriented types of development. And so with that, they have changed the percent of these funds that have to be used in certain areas. So it used to be that it was 75% of the funds that we received needed to be used in the urban environment, 25% needed to be used in the rural areas. This time they parse that out more. And across the two sources that I talked about, the big one being the Surface Transportation Block Grant, the smaller one being the Transportation Alternatives, those two together, 66% of those funds have to go to the urban medium area. And that is, whoops, sorry, go back. That is this area here in white. This is the urban medium area. That is where 66% of the funds need to go. There's also these smaller dark green areas. That is urban small. And that is where 8% of the funds need to go. And the rest, that lighter mint green, is the rural area where 9% of the funding needs to go. But there's also then this flexible fund, 17% here, is flexible, can be used in either the urban or the rural environment. And so when you look at these definitions of urban medium, urban small, and rural, it also has an implication on our members and who can apply for what pots of funds. And so the primary members that are eligible for urban medium are intercity transit, Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Thurston County. The primary for urban small is Thurston County and Yelm. And for rural, it's Thurston County, Yelm, Bucota, Rainier, Tenino, Nisqually Indian Tribe, and Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation are eligible for those. And so this is all that I've presented to you on this page. This is all dictated to us by the requirements of the feds and the state. This is how we have to program the money. Then we have discretion within these, those parameters. Whoops, sorry, I'm ahead again. And so the general concept on this call for projects that we've been talking about, we have is kind of this flow for project priorities. And these project priorities, planning, safety, efficiency, maintenance, resiliency, and active transportation, these really haven't changed much from past calls for projects. I think it was the last one where the last call for projects when active transportation was added. But for the most part, these have been the project priorities that have been fairly stable in our process. Then there's these regional priorities that we are using as the criterion. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a second. And then there's also this issue of set-asides. I'll talk about the Rural Community Support Program. And then there's this issue of both kind of geographic equity and making sure that we can obligate our funds each year. And that's this idea of funding caps. So there's a lot of areas of agreement amongst the TAC, amongst what we've heard from Policy Board and Council to date. We've not heard a disagreement on these project priorities: planning, safety, efficiency, maintenance, resiliency, and active transportation. Again, those are largely unchanged from previous calls for projects, and we have heard agreement on those continuing to be the project priorities going forward. There is a new piece of information, the project eligibility, where this is part of the looking to address the predictability and transparency of the process. We hadn't formalized this before in like this tabular form of, for those different project priority types, what sort of projects are eligible under those. And for the most part, we haven't had a lot of disagreement there. There's a couple of questions that we're still working through with TAC around, should this be allowed under this project type? Why is this allowed under that project type? Those kinds of issues that we're still working through, but for the most part, these tables of project eligibility are an area of agreement. The Rural Community Support Program. This has been really popular with members. This is the program that we did in the last call for projects, where we set aside a percentage of the federal funding, the Surface Transportation Block Grant funding. And the last time it was 6% is what we used to make that available. And we gave those funds, the federal funds, to the county to do a county project for that funding. The county then made local funds available to do projects in Rainier, Tenino, Bucota, Nisqually Indian Tribe. Last time the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation did not put in for it, but they're eligible. And so the last time we had 4 of these projects, this one that you're looking at on the screen, this is Rainier's project, where they're, and it's the first one that's going to go into construction, where they're putting a new crosswalk across 507 to better connect a neighborhood to the trail and a park on the other side of 507. And Tenino's also using it for pedestrian improvements. As is Bucota, as is the Nisqually Indian Tribe. All of them are using this funding for pedestrian improvements. And so there's been strong support to keep this going in the next call for projects. But there is a remaining question of if one of those 5 communities puts in for, because I'm going to go back, so hopefully I don't make anyone motion sick. If you look at this, and you can see my cursor's stalling. There it goes. Okay, it just keeps stalling out, so I won't use my cursor. Sorry.
The yellow stuff.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying actually to look at the rural and the yellow, because you'll see that Bucota, Chehalis, Rainier, Tenino, and Nisqually, they are eligible for either the rural pot or the rural community support program. And that's really the policy question that we still have before the policy board is if one of those entities gets a portion of the rural community support program, can they also, in that same call for projects, get an award out of the rural pot of money? And that's a question that we're going to be tackling with the Transportation Policy Board on the 13th of July.
It wasn't me. That was something to me.
Okay. Okay, so now where we still have some areas to work out, the areas of partial agreement, project evaluation criteria. The 2 that are circled are the 2 where we still have some work to do. There has been agreement on that efficient use of federal funding, general agreement on the way we're doing the greenhouse gas reduction criterion, and there's questions remaining around urban corridors and neighborhood centers. And on equity, there's a social equity piece and a geographic equity piece. There are remaining questions on the geographic piece. The social equity is an area of general agreement. So what are these remaining questions that we'll be tackling with the Transportation Policy Board? The first one is for urban medium. So this is really the greater Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater metro area is urban medium. And as staff, we had proposed further definition of that area by emphasizing the urban corridors and neighborhood centers that were that first derived from Sustainable Thurston, but they've been codified by Lacey, Olympia, and Tumwater in their comp plans. And so the first proposal was that we use these neighborhood centers with a buffer around them, and there would be extra points for projects in these urban corridors or neighborhood centers. The question has come up recently of, do we really need the neighborhood centers, or should we think about this whole urban medium area, that whole white area, as all being the same? That's the question that we have. And if we use neighborhood centers, then there's also a question of, should it be based on the comprehensive plan designations or designation in some other plan? Some others have suggested that it should instead be based on existing land use and character because of the challenges of getting those things designated in comp plans or other plans. So that's a question we're going to be working through with TPB on the 13th. There's also geographic equity has been one of the issues we've spent a lot of time on. And it has two main reasons that we're talking about funding caps. So looking at that table, we've talked kind of about micro caps and macro caps. This micro cap is in a single call for projects process, and that's what this table is. So the staff proposal originally has been that in the urban medium category, so out of those 5 eligible applicants, no one applicant could have more than 3 million in that urban medium category in a given call for projects. In urban small, no one entity could have more than 1 million of that total pot, and the same for rural. And so the reason for those caps, again, is to provide opportunity to more of the entities that are eligible for those funds. But it's also for that reason that I talked about in terms of the importance of making sure we hit our obligation target. There's been discussion of, well, why would we want these caps at all? Wouldn't it be better to find a $10 million project and put all the funds on that $10 million project? The risk that we run there is that when we have all our eggs in very few baskets, if something happens on that project and we don't hit our obligation target, then that year we would not be eligible for redistributed funds. And if we did that 2 years in a row, we would actually lose funding. So for example, if that happened this year, 2022, as I showed you earlier, that's over $2.5 million that we would not have been able to receive because we would not have hit our obligation target. So that is a really important factor in this. Then there's also, Thurston County has brought up on a number of occasions concern that in urban medium that that with the urban corridors and neighborhood centers definitions, that their projects, the county projects, wouldn't compete as well in that urban medium against the projects of the cities and intercity transit. And so there was this idea of, well, if we had a cap on the urban medium across 2 calls for projects where no one entity could get more than 33%, that was the number that we have used to date. No one entity could get more than 33% of the total funds available over 2 calls for projects. And that one would be 100% for geographic equity, to make sure that of those 5 applicants, over 2 to 3 calls for projects, there would be a reasonable opportunity for each one to get their projects funded. Some have suggested that we shouldn't have a cap like that. So that is why this one is here, and we'll be working through that with the Transportation Policy Board. So the next steps on this, we've got our next Technical Advisory Committee meeting on July 7th, where we'll continue to work through a few of those remaining questions that I mentioned with TAC. The TPB meeting coming up on July 13th. Pretty much the entire meeting will be devoted to this. And it's going to be a little bit more of a workshop style where we as staff are going to be facilitating the conversation, including some breakout groups, because we really want to focus on those questions that I just went over and seeing if we can get to TPB agreement on the answers to those questions so that we have a clear recommendation for council. Then a public comment period would follow, and we'd be looking to bring this for discussion and further discussion and deliberation to council in September, October. So I realized that was a lot of information to absorb, but this is an incredibly important piece of what we do. And so as staff, we want to try and help our members understand this process, what's behind these concepts as much as possible. So if you have any questions, please reach out. Be happy to go over any of this in greater detail with members, especially after the Transportation Policy Board meeting, because that's really where we're focusing on trying to help support the TPB to get to a recommendation for council. So that is what I have for you, and I will stop sharing.
Great, thank you, Mark. Appreciate the very meaty presentation. And I see we've got folks in the queue. Quick question for you.
Yes.
Could council members listen into the discussion of the TPP? Might that be supportive and useful?
There is absolutely no reason why council members cannot listen in to the
Okay.
discussion at Transportation Policy Board. And it would be helpful if you had the time, because it would certainly give you a fuller flavor of the kinds of issues that we're still wrestling with. And then you'd be that much ahead as we go into September and October.
Great, thank you. Well,
Yes.
we've got a queue and I will go to Malcolm first.
Hey, Mark, thank you for your presentation. That's all very exciting news and information. I'm so glad that we as a county are, ahead of the curve when it comes to having shovel-ready projects. Is that what I'm understanding you'd say?
We've been incredibly successful in getting some of these extra funds. Yes.
Okay, that's awesome. And I was wondering, I know that some of the rural areas, need a lot more development too. And do you find that is that part of your mandate to get out there and say, hey, show me all your shovel-ready projects, show me everything you've got so that I can, help facilitate some dollars and get them to you? Is that what you're out there doing? Is that?
Well, that's really, for these dollars, that's really what our call for projects process is for. Our members help us do that. We as the policy board and then council lay out kind of our priorities for that process, and then our members respond with their projects in turn. But as we've talked about last month, we brought a contingency list project, contingency project list forward. We are trying to look out ahead. So we not only have the projects identified for our call for projects, but we have more than that identified so that we can be opportunistic if this extra money comes around. But to answer your question on the projects for South County, that's one of the reasons that the Rural Community Support Program began, was because in the way that we have historically done the allocations, the amount received by Yokota, Rainier, Tenino was so low that it was hard for them to do projects with that. They had to kind of save up money over time. And by increasing that through the Rural Community Support Program, this last round, we were actually able to get some projects done for them. And so I think there's also some newer opportunity with this Rural Community Support Program that we hadn't had recently in calls for projects for the South County.
Okay, awesome. And then my second part of that question was, the urban needs and corridor. I just wanted to say thanks for your efforts in trying to establish, a consistent, get people together so that we can establish a consistent theme through our Martin Way corridor that expands, 3 jurisdictions at least?
Yes.
And so,
plus intercity transit.
Yeah, right. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate your efforts in making sure that we're all on the same page and trying to establish something where we can all see a shared vision together for the future of that corridor, because I know that that's not easy work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Clark?
Thank you. Well, as excited as I am about all of this, I'm going to withhold any opinions until we have another, the TPB workshop and the technical advisory committee furthers their work. But I was just remembering that the Transportation Policy Board had a retreat at South Puget Sound maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where this was the topic, was that these new federal requirements were coming to have clear and transparent criteria and evaluation matrix, and that this urban-rural split being dictated was coming our way. So this is sort of the culmination of some long work. And then I'm also thinking about last year's TRPC retreat we had in Yelm, where we spent time on the regional priorities. And so I'm really excited that all of these elements have come together, and I'll look forward to the results from the Transportation Policy Board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clark.
And one other thing I'd like to say on this is it is a new process, and new processes are hard to get to coalesce around, and there's always going to be some uncertainty. And the reason that I bring that up is because our call for projects process, what we're looking for from TPB and council is a willingness to put this process in place and try it for the next call for projects. We will certainly be evaluating, did it actually do what we thought it was going to do? Did it result in the projects getting chosen that we think should have been chosen? And this will be a living process. So this is not if we don't get it 100% correct this time, then we're locked in for X number of years. We're looking for a process that everyone can agree to put into place for the next call for projects. And then we will evaluate and adapt as necessary for future calls.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Are there other questions? Malcolm, is that an old hand or a new hand? Old hand.
That's all. I didn't.
Nope.
Yep.
What-
Still kind of
Chair,
new.
Chair, if I could ask, just because I want to make sure, if I could ask if Karen or Vina or Paul Brewster have any points that they'd like to make that I missed, because this has very much been a team effort, and I want to make sure if I missed anything really crucial that we get it out there.
I think the only thing that I would emphasize, and you did bring this up, is how much of this process is outside of our control. How many decisions are made by the state and the federal government, and that sometimes those are surprises. So this new distribution of funds as far as the urban medium and the like showed up one day, and we said, oh, okay. The opportunity for contingency funds and the like showed up a couple years ago, and we went, oh, okay, let's see how we can make this work. So we're always trying to be available to take advantage of opportunities and to make the process work for everyone. But sometimes we are surprised with how quickly we need to shift gears or change. Mark described the CMAQ funds and the STPG funds. Those have been called different things over the years. The eligibility requirements have changed over the years. So we all want predictability in our lives, especially now, but there is really not any predictability in this. So we try and be very pragmatic, but also agile in reacting to changes and opportunities from the state and federal government.
Thank you, Karen. I see that Debbie has a hand up, so can we let Debbie ask her question, and then we'll also open it up for Paul and Vina. Go ahead, Debbie.
Yeah, so I wanted to know why Intercity Transit had an asterisk on it, and because there wasn't a legend on the urban, small, and rural chart.
I see Paul has, because yes, there is a footnote that I didn't put on there.
You got eagle eyes, Debbie. So that's to indicate that, well, Intercity Transit's Route 94 goes out Yelm Highway past the Nisqually Indian Reservation into the city of Yelm. It technically is eligible for both that pot to have projects programmed in the rural and urban small area. But it's likely that Intercity Transit will be focusing its project and applicants for that urban medium pot of funding, but it's really just to highlight that it's eligible for all those pots, technically is.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Paul or Vina, do you have anything else you would like to share? Or if you have questions or observations, you can raise your hands as well.
The only thing I'd like to add is, and Mark did mention this, just the support that we've had from our the engineering and planning staff that are on our technical advisory committee, not just through this call for projects of pointing out things and kind of poking at it and telling us where it's working, where it isn't working, but also getting those projects up under contract. You know, when we talk about hitting those targets, we want to emphasize it's not TRPC staff that are getting these projects under contract for the most part. It is the staff at the local jurisdictions. They put in these projects, 3 years later, they can get them under contract, but they're working hard. There are so many parts and pieces of this. And and if one runs into difficulty, we've had partners step up and move their projects up a year or two. It's just amazing the collaboration and cooperation that your staff are putting in together behind the scenes. And I just want to give them a shout out here.
You're here. Thank you, Vina.
Thank you, Vina.
And I
you,
don't have
staff.
anything else to add. Vina summed it up and Mark did a great job presenting areas we're still working on. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Yeah, this is such important work. And as Clark referenced our retreat last year, we wrestled with the fact that transportation is just a huge part of our work, but that it impacts so many parts of our values. So thank you to everyone who's putting focused effort into really thinking deeply about how we do this part of our work. And that brings us to our report from outside committees. Helen, do you have anything from the Puget Sound Regional Council?
Yeah, they're busy up there. So yeah, there's I could talk about a lot or not so much. The next meeting is July 7th, so it's next week, and it's looking at climate and industrial lands. So folks might be interested in that. It's all these days, it's all about the rollout of the comp plan revisions, as I've said before, and they're just pumping out so much useful stuff, you know, because they've made a real priority of trying to help local jurisdictions with this process. So, you know, I can't emphasize enough how valuable it is to go to their website and poke around. The last meeting was quite a while ago now. It was June 2nd, and it was about housing. And the things that they covered, it was all within the framework of the regional housing strategy that they have as part of their Vision 2050. And the particular things that they're working on in terms of data is they're developing a picture of trying to develop a really clear picture of the housing types that are available throughout the region, and developing a typology of that housing that jurisdictions can use. And the ultimate aim of that is to try to focus policy as well as possible on the right kinds of housing to meet the needs. So that's kind of what they're really focusing on developing tools around. And I'll get into that a little more in a second, but also they are rolling out these kind of workshops, and they did one on June 15th for planning staff in the region about the Growth Management Act periodic update. And they are planning to do one for electeds sometime in the near future. And hopefully I can tell you a date for that, because that might be helpful. And then the other thing that they just did on June 23rd was a general workshop on implicit bias, which I wasn't going to say much about it. I didn't attend it, but it looked like it was good. And I just found out this morning that they have provided a recording of the presentation, and I can give that to people if they're interested. They were aiming to have fairly practical tips on how to manage implicit bias, including data tracking and decision-making processes and things like that. So just really quickly at the June meeting on housing, they kind of had 3 different areas. They looked at regional housing strategy implementation. And in particular, they talked about the question they asked themselves about how they can help with less costly access to home ownership. And they basically ran a study where they found, not surprisingly, that if you have some kind of infill you want to deal with, you knock down a single family house, you build some multifamily housing, and it's more affordable for people to access. So townhomes and condos. So they have like data around that. And another thing that that was interesting that they talked about was work that they've done on who gets the equity of access. And they really emphasized the fact that for Black communities and Native and Pacific Islanders, they have half the ownership rate, home ownership rate of white and Asian communities. And the gap is not shrinking, it's growing. In terms of Hispanic communities, they're at about, well, for white and Asian communities, it's about in the 60 percentile. And Hispanics are in the 40s, and they are seeing some improvement, but for Black and Native and Pacific Islanders, it's getting worse rather than better. Let's see. So then they also talked about the amendment to the Growth Management Act that requires housing planning for all income levels. And they've been really focused on that and rolling out tools to help people with that. One of the areas that they've been looking at that I think might be of interest to folks is they have a lot of stuff around ADUs, accessory dwelling units. They have model language, they have, all kinds of stuff about outreach and so on that's available. And then the third thing that they did at the last meeting is they actually brought a sort of sampling of sub-regional housing groups and the work that they're doing to give a sense of the range of things that that different agencies, sub-regional housing agencies are doing, which I thought was pretty interesting. The focuses are often a little bit different. Some of them are more focused on building more housing units, and others are more interested in maintaining housing stability. And so I think that's something, they're a resource that folks might want to think about. And that's it. But there'll probably be a lot to talk about with the climate and industrial land stuff that's coming up.
Thank you, Helen. That sounds like a lot of rich content, and maybe there's a way for us to provide that in the show notes after the meeting.
I think we can.
Okay. Great. Thank you for sharing, Helen. That takes us to the executive director's report.
Yeah, so one of the things I wasn't going to mention, but since Helen did, I will. I attended Puget Sound Regional Council's implicit bias workshop. It was for their members, but I asked if I could attend because it's been something we have been focusing on, and so I wanted to see what kind of discussion Puget Sound Regional Council was having around this, and it was good. They've been able to hire a staff devoted to issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I'm paying attention to what they're doing to see if we can, poach useful information from their ability to have that full staff person. And thanks for Helen. I didn't know that they had recorded that session, so that will be good to know. And we'll be looking to provide a link to that, because one thing that I will say is during that session, it points you to an online test of implicit bias. It's done through, I don't remember who it's done through, but it's really pretty cool actually, because it kind of works on, speed's a factor. So
was it the Harvard one?
I think Harvard is.
That is a good one.
Yeah, and so if you haven't taken that yet, it's a really interesting test to go through. So I would, I'd suggest people take a look at that. I'd also say, in relation to Puget Sound Regional Council, oftentimes we look up to the north to our bigger partner and get ideas from them. But they've reached out to us recently, to Allison Osterberg, to get ideas from us. They are about to embark on climate mitigation planning, and they've reached out to us to get some information from Allison, and just to kind of help them scope out that work from the experience that we've had over the past few years. So it's pretty good to see us leading the way on that front, and able to help Puget Sound Regional Council get their work started. Lastly, I touched on this in my presentation, but I want to mention again, just in the past couple of weeks, we've received this additional funding. Yelm got $647,000 and change for their Mossman Avenue Phase 2 project. This is funding that they had some amount of federal funding and at least 647 of local funds. Now they get those local funds back, and that money is now going to be federal. So Yelm essentially got back that $647,000. Awesome. Lacey, for the electric vehicle charging station, the bids came in high on those, and so they received an extra $232,000. Tumwater for their X Street roundabout, also to reduce that local share, they got an additional $1.56 million for that. So those are funds then that get to go back to those jurisdictions to use on other priorities. So just this opportunity of getting these quote unquote extra funds is huge and really important for us to keep taking advantage of. So thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you, Mark. That takes us, is there anything else? you
Nope,
wanna talk
I'm
about?
good.
Okay.
Oh,
I think
yep.
you did want to talk about, okay. Is there something else you want to talk about?
Yes, there is,
Okay.
Chair. Thank you. We've been talking about our meetings, and this is now our third hybrid meeting. We have very limited in-person participation in these, and so we want to talk with council again and send out a survey to find out where people are at on this. And it is a little more effort on a staff perspective for us to provide this hybrid option. And so we want to find out if we did this quarterly, would more people come in person? If we did it twice yearly, would more people come in person? Where are people at in terms of the desire for this in-person meeting versus the ability to participate remotely? Because right now, with more people participating remotely, this in-room experience makes a little less sense.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, that brings us to member check-in, and this is the time for members to share out something exciting that's happening in your jurisdiction that you think other folks should know about. It's also a time if you would like to share out something exciting that you heard in the meeting today that you're excited to bring back to your jurisdiction. So I will look for hands for a cue for member check-in share out. Go ahead, Eileen.
Thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know that the Tumwater 4th of July parade is back. And so we'll be there on Monday and invite people to come to Tumwater to see our parade. And as well as the fireworks, we'll be doing the fireworks again down at the golf course. So just to let you know, we're celebrating the 4th of July again.
Thank you, Eileen. That's awesome news. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Exciting news. It's always interesting from coming out of the economic development world sometimes. As you know, we've been tracking the economy for quite some time with an index. We create the Economic Vitality Index. I think when I reported to you right before the pandemic, the Economic Vitality Index was at 116, all-time high at 116. And that measures actually the flow of economic activity in the community. A variety of different things. So the St. Martin's University economists have put this together for us, and they continue to monitor it for us. We're at an all-time high at 116 at the end of 2019. Midpoint of 2021, we had dropped 48% off that index down to an all-time low of 80. So went from 116 down to 80. We had just published the latest index this week for the first half of the year, and we're back up to 118.86, which is very strange because it's back at the all-time high. When you start looking at the cutaways from that, you think, well, everything's good, but it's not good. There's a lot of choppy water out there. You look at the confidence survey that we do, we're actually at an all-time low of people feeling how the economy is going to operate. So the economy is, still performing, but there's a lot of choppy water out there. Folks are concerned. So it's an all-time low for confidence, but it's an all-time high for business activities, which is kind of strange. And if you look at the GDP for Thurston County, we're about $14.25 billion. Before the pandemic, we were at almost 15. So we've shaved off quite a bit of activity that just flows through the communities quite a bit, but it's starting to build back up and come back in the form of employment and also retail sales. As you know, retail sales drives a lot of your budgets. One thing to think about is that retail sales in Thurston County since the beginning of the pandemic is up 38%. The hard part of that is that where it's generated from is not local business. Local business is down, business closed. We have 28% less small businesses operating in Thurston County than we did at the beginning of the pandemic. So something to think about there. The other thing is we've just, thank you Thurston County through the recovery funds. We just through our BIPOC Business Advisory Council awarded 10 startup grants for a business plan competition. We received 51 applicants in target zones or low to moderate income regions of Thurston County. We awarded 10 grants for business startups, each at $100,000. Pretty significant piece of work there for folks. And if you look at that and extrapolate that out as to how that's going to impact those impacted communities, were adversely impacted the most. When you think about employment, that represents in 3 years over 150 new jobs. So it's a nice thing to do there as well. We're very excited about it. We wrap around our services around the Center for Business Innovation for all of those applicants, even the ones that did not receive a grant. We have kind of brought them in and allowed them to access all of our resources, the investment network and all the business training. So hopefully we'll get them up and running. The other thing that you're probably aware of, and Mark, you're probably more aware than I, federal government recently changed its requirements for organizations receiving federal funds in the form of grants. For all those that have worked with your small businesses and nonprofits, federal government no longer uses the DUNS system, the Data Universal Number System, and instead has shifted to a new system known as the UEI, which is Unique Entity Identifier. As of April 2022, recipients of grants using federal funds, which include the upcoming Working Washington Grants 5, will have to use the UEI. We have staff, actually statewide experts on our staff that have been doing UEIs for folks throughout Washington State. So if you have anybody or company or a nonprofit that needs to apply for a UEI, have them come to our organization, and then we can walk through the process through them. And actually, it's kind of easy, but it's fairly technical. We had to do it for ourselves, and I about pulled the rest of my hair out of my head. So, but again, you can send people to the hotline to do that. It's 888-821-6652. Interesting comments about housing up in King County, how they're tracking that. Thank you, Helen. A couple of things to think about. We've also been tracking, what we've been tracking is first-time home buyers, affordability, some alarming trends for us. 2015, there was about parity. If you look at the data for first-time home buyers is relative to the incomes earned in this community. But after 2015, that just dropped off like a stone. So that gap between affordability for first-time home buyers is increasing year by year. And so we really need to start thinking about ways that we can address that. It's not a solution that the Thurston Economic Development Council come up, but it's going to take all of us to address the topic about housing affordability, especially for first-time home buyers. It is creating a significant problem for our communities. And I just want to bring that up, and maybe that's something Mark and I and his team could talk offline and start talking about that. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. That was so much good information. Appreciate it. Hopefully some of that makes it in the show notes too.
If Michael could send it to us, it can make it into the show notes.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to share either something exciting from their jurisdiction or something they're really excited to bring back to their jurisdiction? I'm looking in the room too.
Yeah, so I'll wait for anybody else up there.
I don't see any hands online, John, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Over the last 10 years out in Tenino, we've been holding what's called the First Responders Potluck Barbecue. It's a free event. It's no politics, anything like that. And I checked our rules. So we checked off on everything. There's nothing in there that says that I can't talk about this. This year will be the 10th year. We've missed 2 of them. So we've done 8 of them. This is the first year that as a city, we have decided to put together a proclamation to recognize the second Saturday of September from this day forward to be known as a First Responders Appreciation Day. Again, September 10th that is the date for this year. It's a free event. So there'll be pony rides, there'll be live music. Ty Messmer is going to bring his Holy Mountain Boys down, and they're going to do live music for us. Miss Thurston County is going to be there, maybe Miss Lewis County as well. But it's basically just to meet and greet all of our first responders, the men and women that when you call 911, they're there. They don't ask questions, they just show up. This has been something near and dear to my heart because I was a volunteer fireman for 10 years, now I'm a fire commissioner. And a lot of the time these guys go with no one saying thank you to them. We say thank you to our veterans a lot. I've been doing that for 30 years now. And I've been saying it to whenever I can see that it's an officer or a fireman, I say the same thing, do the same thing. I pull them aside, let them know. This is something that happens. The county does one for on a national Police Week. This is something specifically for Thurston County. It's to say thank you to all the first responders of Thurston County. If I can, I'll send a flyer and maybe that can go out with the thing as well. And so everybody gets in. That works out really well because we don't have a meeting next month. I hope a lot of you guys can come down. The only thing I do ask is if you do come, and if you can, just to bring a little side dish, because I've got the hot dogs, the hamburgers, the soft drinks, and yada, 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 blah, 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 all of that good stuff. But sometimes it just helps to have a little side dish. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, John. Sounds like a fun event, and we'll get it in the show notes. I see Helen has something to share. Go ahead, Helen.
Yeah, well, sorry to be a downer after the cheerful festive stuff, but I just wanted, this is more of a good of the order or something, but we were sent the cost of living index information, which we didn't really get a chance to talk about at this meeting. And I have to say something that really jumped out at me was that the Olympia Lacey Tumwater numbers for healthcare were the worst in the whole bunch at 126.6. And so even though that only accounts, generally for 4% of the overall cost of living, that just seems like a horrible number for us in this county. And it's certainly something to think about in terms of equity. I'm sure there are people for whom that is way more than 4% of their budget. And it's it just needs to be pointed out, I guess, that Olympia Lacey Tumwater was the worst of the whole bunch. So that's my take. That's a little takeaway that I just wanted to have a chance to mention.
And I just wanted to follow up on that briefly because great timing, Helen. We were talking about this as staff yesterday. So folks that don't know, we've been part of this national effort to collect information on cost of living, where I think there's about 150 cities across the nation where you go out and you find the costs of this certain list of goods, and everyone is looking at the same list and what's the cost of those goods. And from that, we get this index of cost of living. And that is something that we generally, well, we do provide at each time it's updated as an attachment to the package. But with some of the changes in the economy, the increases in inflation, we were just talking yesterday about, as staff about, we're going to bring this to council as an agenda item in the future. We might wait 1 or 2 more to just kind of see get a little more of a trend line. But we do want to bring that information to council because we're seeing more change than usual and not unexpected, because there's a lot of change going on in the economy right now.
Yeah, thank you both. That's good to think about. Bob, do you have something?
Yeah, I was gonna just say that I agree with Helen. I was kind of, pardon me?
No, I'm trying to get you in frame. Sorry, there we go.
I was just gonna say that I was also alarmed by by that report, Helen, and I think that was very good of you to bring that up, so thank you. A couple of things. First off, I can't believe Michael Cade didn't promote his Hootenanny coming up here later in the month, but thinking about the high cost of living in the area, promote a free activity for the weekend. The Port is sponsoring with the Downtown Alliance Music in the Park concert. It's on July 3rd, the Brothers Hammond Band, and I believe it's like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you want something free to do on Sunday, that'll be a good thing. So that's all I have.
Those guys are pretty good.
Thank you, Bob. It's really wonderful to hear about all of these events that are sort of slowly starting up again in your jurisdictions and filling up our calendars with joyful gatherings. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody else have anything else to share from jurisdictions or excited to bring back to their jurisdiction? Okay, I will share. I'm super excited about asking my fellow board members to join me in the week without driving. So thank you, Karen, for bringing that to us. And thank you, Clark, for reminding us that it's a good exercise for us to undertake. And I just want to remind folks that you can attend the TPB conversation if you're interested in that call for projects conversation.
Yes.
Please go and listen to that. I guess I just also want to say, since I'm the last person saying it, I really love all of the wonderful stories that we're hearing about collaboration. I'm trying to figure out if I should look up or look down. I'm going to look up, but know that I'm looking at you on the screen. All the wonderful stories we're hearing about that collaboration between municipalities, that sharing and connection. It just feels like it's a really good reminder that none of us get together and do good work unless we do it together. And so in the spirit of that, I just want to offer that appreciation for everyone who shared about that important work that they're doing in our community. And also in the spirit of that, since we don't have a meeting in August, I would encourage you to use the time that you normally would spend at TRPC to think about going to visit a jurisdiction that is outside of your own, that you maybe haven't been to in a while, and take some time to get to know a little bit about what's happening outside of your area so that we can come back in September with that increased knowledge and appreciation for all of our beautiful communities here in Thurston County. And look for the survey about in-person meetings. And if there's nothing else, we are adjourned. I'm going to use the gavel.
Non-debatable motion.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Mark,